In 1997, the British National Archives welcomed a journalist from the United States. He was granted access to view secret documents from over 100 years ago. The journalist's name was Winchester, and he was about to share a mysterious story that had been sealed away with us. Surprisingly, this work, acclaimed as one of the most outstanding in the English-speaking world, and once setting a new order for the globe, was written by a madman and an uneducated person. These two men, who would never give up, left behind their outstanding work. But due to their lower social status in Britain, the British nobility chose to seal away their deeds. It was not until 1997 that the journalist Winchester once again brought their story to the public. Rewinding to 1857, at that time, 10-year-old Alexander Bell had not yet invented the telephone. He was admiring a magic show performed by an uncle with a big beard. This uncle, 20-year-old James Moray, was teaching young Bell how to create a battery using a half-penny copper coin and a piece of zinc. Thus, Bell formed a deep connection with electrics, and at Moray's wedding, he appeared as a page boy. Subsequent researchers commonly hold the view that Uncle Moray was undoubtedly one of Britain's most outstanding geniuses at the time. If Bell is hailed as the father of the telephone, then Moray is undoubtedly its precursor, for it was Moray who laid the foundations of electrics for Bell. According to some sources, the original design of the telephone was preserved in Moray's attic for a considerable period. The design of this telephone was inspired by Bell's learning experience at the Moray household when he was 20, where he and Moray co-designed and created this telephone. Whether this astonishing information is true or false, we must mention the connection between Moray and Bell's father, both renowned linguists. The elder Bell, only 38 at the time, was widely regarded as a genius in the field of linguistics in Britain, coming from a prestigious family and currently focusing on a research topic named visible speech. At that time, 20-year-old Moray was actually a language prodigy who had dropped out of school at 14 and achieved success through self-study, or more precisely, he was a self-taught genius. In that era, British society highly valued one's background and educational credentials. For a young man from the lower commercial class like Moray, without a university education, he would never be recognized by the orthodox academic world, merely being a self-learner. Despite this, the elder Bell held Moray in high esteem, quickly recognizing him as an extraordinary genius, not just in the field of linguistics, but also in the cutting-edge fields of electrics and physiology. Therefore, the elder Bell decided to entrust young Bell to Moray's care. What exactly young Bell learned from Moray is a completely different story. In short, Bell's later invention of the telephone technology was actually a fusion of Moray's electrical knowledge with his father's visible speech ideas conveyed through wires. Thus, the often overlooked gentleman Moray was indeed a man of remarkable talent. In that era, the British nobility highly valued family backgrounds, making it difficult for anyone, no matter how intelligent, to integrate into their esteemed culture. Thus, Moray remained at the bottom of the social ladder, limited to ordinary jobs such as a bank clerk or a secondary school teacher, unable to enter the academia controlled by the nobility. Time flew, and before one knew it, 20 years had passed. It was 1878, and Moray was 41 years old when Oxford University desperately needed a new editor to continue the work on the Oxford Dictionary. Despite the project already being 21 years in the making, the enormous workload had led to the demise of 3 consecutive editors, one of whom even died of overwork at his desk. While the nobility eagerly awaited responses to their letters, no linguist dared to apply for the position. However, on April 26th, 41-year-old Moray walked into the Oxford University drafting room with his resume in hand. He intended to apply for the chief editor position, but the nobles present thought he had lost his mind. How could a self-taught individual who had dropped out of school at 14 lead such a project? One of the noble scholars asked with a hint of sarcasm, "Mr. Moray, you do understand the true meaning of intelligent, don't you?" Moray explained calmly. Intelligent could possibly originate from a dialect in northern Germany, or perhaps it's a dialect term from central Holland, signifying being active and alert. Later, the word evolved into intelligent. After hearing these words, the professors looked at each other, then revisited Moray's resume more carefully. Unexpectedly, he was indeed a prodigy in the field of linguistics. Moray's resume clearly stated that he was proficient in a multitude of languages and literatures from the Aryan and Syro-Arabian language families. Although he was not an expert in multiple fields, he demonstrated remarkable adaptability in various Romance dialects, such as Italian, French, Catalan, Spanish, Latin, Portuguese, Swiss dialects, and Provençal. In the branches of the Teutonic languages, he had an in-depth understanding of Dutch, Flemish, German, and Danish. He conducted extensive research on Anglo-Saxon and Gothic languages, authoring several scholarly papers. He also had knowledge of Celtic languages and was currently studying various Slavic languages, with the ability to fluently speak Russian. He possessed deep knowledge in the field of ancient Achaemenid Persian cuneiform and ancient Indian Sanskrit, as well as comparative linguistics. His understanding and mastery of Hebrew and ancient Syriac were substantial, enabling him to easily read the Hebrew Old Testament and the Peshitta, the Syriac version of the Bible. Additionally, he had some knowledge of ancient Aramaic Arabic, Coptic, ancient Egyptian, and unearthed Phoenician languages. This resume was initially submitted to the British Museum by Moray 12 years prior, at the age of 29, and was explicitly marked with the word rejected. At that time, he aspired to be appointed as a librarian of the museum's collection, but was turned down. The noble professors raised their heads, their gaze falling upon the middle-aged man before them, as if sensing the once proud air that the resume exuded. However, regarding hiring him, the nobles had no other choice but to accept Moray's request, yet they still temporarily forbade him from entering the editorial room. As the chief editor, Moray had no assistants. He had to start from scratch with only a $175 check for funds. Thus, Moray constructed an iron house in his backyard and declared to his 8 children and spouse that he was about to embark on a grand mission. After careful calculations, he realized that with the technological capabilities of his time, completing this task would require at least 1,000 years. The dictionary's core purpose was to clarify the definitions of English words. Therefore, aside from each word's meaning, spelling, and pronunciation, its etymology and the development process should also be comprehensively recorded. Every form of the word that appeared during each developmental phase had to be described accurately, providing example sentences used by English writers of that era for that vocabulary. If an example sentence could not be found, then the word could not be considered complete. Typically, about 6 example sentences were needed for a single word, based on all information related to English. What kind of concept was this? In short, from the day various original languages of English were born, all written records, printed versions, and every single sentence mattered. Thus, the task Moray undertook was enormously vast. The first word in the dictionary, A, took Moray 4 whole pages to describe, followed by the uncommon word A, representing streams and rivers. To confirm the authenticity of this vocabulary, Moray found an example sentence from 1430, describing the wetlands of Lincolnshire, where a stream flowed, habitually called the Levittown AA by the locals. Following this was a term still in use today, AAL, referring to a plant from Hindi or Bengali, often used as a dye. To verify this, Moray consulted the Dictionary of Manufactures and Mine Products published in 1839 and extracted example sentences from it. He extracted a pale yellow substance from the root of the AAL plant and named it Morindin. The word aardvark means a ground pig from South Africa, a creature that resembles both an armadillo and an anteater, primarily living in regions near the Sahara Desert, with a long, sticky tongue. Moray provided 3 example sentences for this vocabulary, with the earliest example dating back to 1833. This section also retained a record of Moray's early work, which included a letter to the curator of the Royal Botanical Gardens, inquiring about the name under which a foreign plant was first registered. He wrote to merchants in the port to delve into the historical background of dragon ships on the Tyne River, to Jesuit priests to discuss a lesser-known viewpoint within the Roman Curia, to the secretary of the Astronomical Society, to inquire about the definition of prime mover and the solar constant, and to the editorial team of the Teams regarding a letter from 1620 that first mentioned Punch, among other things. Moray's work was not merely editing a dictionary, it was more akin to compiling an encyclopedia. His task was tantamount to creating an encyclopedia entry for every existing and no longer used English word, with an estimated total of 400,000 entries, which was undoubtedly a cautious estimate. After several months of work, Moray hired 2 assistants. He had these assistants start writing letters for him, but instead of writing each one individually, he opted for an open letter named Invitation to English Users, worldwide to co-edit the Oxford Dictionary. He instructed his assistants to embed this open letter in all English books, newspapers, and magazines. As this batch of English printed materials spread globally, Moray began to recruit volunteers from around the world to assist them in searching for relevant vocabulary. He was well aware that he and his few assistants could never read all the English materials in their lifetime. Therefore, he had to mobilize the public, inviting everyone proficient in English to participate, to search for and contribute their example sentences. With such a method, progress on the work was incredibly fast, with continuous examples being sent from around the world to Britain, and words on Moray's typesetting board being removed one after another. However, at this critical moment, the Nobel professors again expressed dissatisfaction. One day, Moray was summoned to the office of the Vice-Chancellor of Oxford University. The Vice-Chancellor said, "According to the contract, our first proof copy is expected to be published in 1882, which is a year from now. The sample drafts received by our Oxford University Press should cover the content from A to ANT. Mr. Moray, you should also be aware that Oxford University has invested hundreds of thousands of pounds and more than 20 years of time into this book, so you must strictly adhere to the contract terms." It was evident that Moray had to continue exerting effort under immense societal pressure to meet the expectations and requirements of the noble class. Despite feeling as if he was racing against 10,000 horses, Moray still calmly proposed, hoping that Oxford University would once again allow him to hire more assistants and cover the related expenses. The Vice-Chancellor said with a smile, "According to the contract terms, we can hire assistants, but the expenses will have to be borne by you. Please bear in mind, Mr. Moray, we still have 6 months, and the contract clearly mentions that we need to review the first draft proof copy from A to ANT." Under the weight of pressure, Mr. Moray rode his bicycle back to his corrugated iron home, unsure of how to break the news to his assistants, whether to announce the necessity of overtime work or to resign. Standing in front of the iron house, Moray appeared bewildered. But at this critical moment, an assistant dashed out, waving his hands enthusiastically to greet Murray. He excitedly proclaimed, "Professor Murray, this is nothing short of a miracle." Astonishingly, a volunteer named Mino had sent in over 1,000 example sentences in one go, each of them exceedingly precise. From 14th century manuscripts to newly published books, the assistant checked and found that the page numbers provided by Mino were spot on. Even more crucially, Mino stated in his letter, "If you need more examples, feel free to ask me, as I can find almost everything on my side." This was utterly staggering. Could this Mino be a ChatGPT that had traveled from another dimension? Murray, incredulous, immediately checked the signature on the letter, which simply indicated Berkshire, Crowthorne, and Broadmoor, locations known for a psychiatric hospital. Being no more than an hour's drive from Oxford, could this imply that Mino was a long reclusive psychiatrist? At this critical moment, the iron gates of the psychiatric hospital unexpectedly fell, striking a prison guard's thigh and causing immediate chaos. Police officers who rushed to the scene attempted to lift the gate, but the injured guard was in excruciating pain, his blood pouring out uncontrollably. Panic engulfed everyone present as they witnessed the guard's plight. Suddenly, a prisoner rushed forward, swiftly using a belt to tightly bind the guard's thigh and then asking, "How far is the nearest blacksmith?" Another guard estimated a round trip would take about 30 minutes. Without waiting for further response, the prisoner skillfully tore open the injured guard's uniform, focusing on a wound that gushed like a fountain. He urgently requested a sharp knife and a steel saw, explaining the dire consequence of arterial damage and the immediate need for action to prevent fatal blood loss within half an hour. The prisoner's gaze was both firm and profound. Instantly, all the guards were stunned, and a superior ordered subordinates to fetch the knife and saw. Under everyone's watchful eyes, the prisoner first sterilized the knife with flame before performing an amputation on the guard right there, saving his life. Clearly, the editorial department had not anticipated that this prisoner, the very person in front of them, was Mino. He was not a psychiatrist, but, in fact, an extremely dangerous and mad killer. 8 years prior, Mino had a mental breakdown on the streets of London, leading to the accidental killing of a man. He was sentenced to life imprisonment by the court. However, he was also a distinguished American Army surgeon, a captain from the Mino family of Connecticut. He graduated from Yale University and served in the American Civil War, receiving an annual pension of $1,200. Given that the frequency of his mental breakdowns had significantly decreased, his living conditions in the psychiatric hospital were relatively good. He had a private room filled with books sent from his family home in the United States, allowing him ample time to read. On Christmas of 1880, the guard whom he had once saved gifted him a book he had long wished to read. Tucked in the opening of this book was Murray's open letter to English readers worldwide. Mino, following the instructions in the open letter, quickly organized and mailed over 1,000 example sentences. Similarly, Murray was thrilled to complete the first edition binding of the Oxford Dictionary, containing 8,065 words. He eagerly wished to share this research achievement with Dr. Mino. However, upon their meeting, Murray was shocked to see the shackles on Mino's feet. Despite this, when the two men met for the first time, it was as if they saw a completely different version of themselves in a mirror. Not only did they bear a striking physical resemblance, even their iconic beards were nearly identical. Mino was not just a linguistics genius. He was born in Sri Lanka and had traveled the world on missionary trips with his father since childhood, visiting countries such as India, Thailand, and Singapore. He was not only an expert in English and French, but also fluent in many languages unfamiliar to Professor Morey, including Hindi, Burmese, Khmer, Malay, and various Chinese dialects. Following this, at the tender age of 14, Mino developed profound affections for the girls on the beaches of Sri Lanka, affections that were incompatible with his family's deep-seated faith. For this reason, his father decided to send him back to America to temporarily reside with an uncle. Despite excelling in both academics and character, Mino's terrifying desires trailed him like demons. He graduated from Yale University Medical School at the age of 29, his field of study being comparative anatomy. Shortly thereafter, he became a member of the Union Army and participated in the American Civil War as a captain and army surgeon. Mino described, "On the battlefields of that era, all weapons were advanced and efficient, yet medical technology remained at a primitive stage, barely evolved from tribal times. The fields were strewn with mortars and smoothbore rifles, and the army surgeon's kit lacked even anesthetics. The conditions in field hospitals were chaotic and filthy, diseases ran rampant, and gangrene and amputations were commonplace, with the wounded suffering immensely." In such a war environment, Mino, being a naturally sensitive person, could not adapt to the cruelty. He longed for the tranquility of studying, painting, and playing the flute. Thus, one afternoon, all the mental trauma erupted. Mino was ordered to brand a deserter of Irish nationality with a shameful D on his face. All the horrific scenes of the battlefield flashed before him at that moment, leading to his mental breakdown. When he recovered from the breakdown, he had completely lost his sanity, developing severe mental illness. He integrated the traumas of war into his life and then completely vanished within the shadows of war. Eventually, he succumbed to mental collapse. After understanding Dr. Mino's background, Morey became acutely aware of the urgency of the situation. If the nobility were to find out that a man considered mad had participated in the editing of the Oxford Dictionary, it was uncertain what would happen next. Thus, Morey undertook efforts to keep Mino's true identity a secret, while also secretly devising a plan aimed at freeing Mino. The verdict documents from that year made it clear that Mino would be under strict supervision until the Queen was willing to alter the final decision of the trial. Although it might seem understated, everyone understood this essentially meant life imprisonment. Despite this, Mino was not a murderer, but a patient with a mental disorder. Therefore, by first proving that his mental illness had been treated and then showcasing his contributions to society, it might be possible to petition the Queen for the pardon of this ally's patient. Morey's plan involved compiling comprehensive documentation of Mino's invaluable contributions to the Oxford Dictionary, alongside medical records attesting to his stable mental health condition. This dossier would be presented to the legal authorities and, if possible, directly to the Queen herself, emphasizing not only Mino's genius and his remarkable contributions despite his circumstances, but also highlighting the compassionate and rehabilitative approach to mental health issues. The strategy was a long shot, fraught with challenges, including the stigma of mental illness and the rigid attitudes of the era towards crime and punishment. However, Morey was determined to do everything within his power to advocate for Mino, hoping that the remarkable story of redemption and scholarly achievement might sway the hearts and minds of those in power to grant Mino a second chance at freedom. Therefore, Morey's rescue strategy was, in fact, to collaborate with the prison warden, who also had an academic background as a psychiatrist, to treat the trauma Mino suffered post-war. The warden's analysis suggested that Mino, when deeply troubled, had chosen a hedonistic lifestyle to numb himself. Unfortunately, all witnessed his downward spiral until he accidentally killed someone during a hallucination and was incarcerated. Initially, he was always afraid someone would break into his room, making his mental state extremely unstable. However, over time it was realized that through reading, he could escape his mental fog. When he wholeheartedly dedicated himself to the dictionary editing task, everyone noticed his behavior gradually became more normalized. The warden asked, "Professor Murray, had it not been for the shackles on his feet, could you have been certain whether he was a doctor or a patient when you first met?" Murray nodded in strong agreement. In the next stage of the treatment plan, the warden suggested, "We can start by addressing his guilt." Under the guidance of the doctor, Mino learned about the identity of the unfortunate Boilermaker he had accidentally killed. This man had been the sole breadwinner for a family of 7 children, and his wife was pregnant at the time of his death. Subsequently, to sustain her family, his wife resorted to prostitution, and the children started contributing through handicrafts to the household income. After learning about these circumstances, Mino felt profound remorse for his actions and entrusted all his savings, along with his annual pension of $1,200 to the man's widow. Before her husband's death, his monthly wage had been only 96 shillings, equivalent to 17.6. Thus, Mino's act of kindness quickly touched the widow's heart. This gesture not only helped alleviate Mino's guilt, but also demonstrated his deep compassion and desire to make amends, highlighting the complexity of his character. It showcased his ability to contribute positively to society, despite the shadows of his past. This transformation and act of restitution were crucial steps in his rehabilitation, possibly influencing any considerations for his pardon or improved treatment within the institution. Finally, one day, the widow accepted Dr. Mino and brought him to the psychiatric hospital. During their meeting, she noticed Mino was engulfed in deep self-reproach and began to make efforts to forgive him. Thus, the hatred gradually dissipated. Mino began to teach her how to read and write, deepening her understanding of the world through books. As time passed, the widow started sharing her troubles about the children's growth with Mino, who provided her with emotional comfort. In those moments, Mino truly acted like a father figure. It seemed everything was moving towards a better direction. However, tragedy often strikes when least expected. One day, the warden found Professor Murray and told him, "Mino's behavior seems to be becoming increasingly normal. Next, I propose letting the woman bring her children to visit Mino. If all grievances can be resolved, I might be able to provide more concrete diagnostic evidence for Mino." Thus, under the warden's arrangement, the lady came to visit Mino with her children. Despite appearances, when the eldest daughter saw the man responsible for her father's death, she found it unbearable. 8 years ago, she already had memories, and she vividly remembered the man who caused her family's downfall. Surprisingly, merely because of his wealth, he had chosen to forgive himself 8 years later, bringing him a comfortable life. Isn't it? The situation highlights the complex emotions and ethical dilemmas surrounding forgiveness, redemption, and the consequences of one's actions. The reactions of the widow and her children, especially the eldest daughter, underscore the lasting impact of trauma and the challenging process of healing. The proposal by the warden to bring the children to visit Mino, aiming to provide more concrete diagnostic evidence, suggests a belief in the possibility of rehabilitation and reconciliation. However, it also raises questions about the adequacy of financial restitution in addressing emotional and psychological wounds. The narrative suggests that while forgiveness and rehabilitation are possible, they are complex processes that require time, understanding, and genuine contrition. Faced with this situation, the eldest daughter, overwhelmed by emotion, slapped Mino harshly in front of everyone, then struck him again as though her heart was being torn apart. Following this, Tragedy struck as the intense hatred from the daughter plunged Mino back into deep guilt. He suddenly fell ill, closed off all the passages in his room, and was consumed by a profound fear of a fictional Irishman, rendering him unable to continue his work on the dictionary. Mino quickly descended into a state of madness due to his mental torment. At the same time, Professor Morey found himself in a severe crisis. Surprisingly, Mino's renewed madness and the slap from the eldest daughter were reported by the media. When the nobles in the editorial committee learned the truth, they were furious. How could our esteemed Oxford Dictionary involve a mad criminal from a foreign land in its editing? They directed their questioning at Morey with disdain. Morey was left without an answer, facing the worst outcome he had feared. The academic community also seized upon the topic, criticizing Morey for omitting key information during the dictionary's compilation and pointing out several editorial errors. They renewed their criticism of Morey, deeming him unqualified for the role of chief editor since he had dropped out of school at 14. Despite this, Morey remained patient, hoping to respond to the nobility's critiques with better work performance. Morey's work under immense psychological pressure became even more exhausting, eventually leading to chronic pneumonia due to physical overexertion. While the nobles in the Oxford editorial office continued to nitpick, Morey, living in his corrugated iron house, kept coughing persistently. Despite the assistants stuffing the windows with paper boxes, the cold and dampness of Oxford's winter caused Morey's fever to persist. At the same time, his wife began to argue with him, complaining that she had always supported Morey, who, in turn, had secretly collaborated with a madman. Morey's spouse, herself of noble birth, struggled to accept Mino's involvement. She accused her husband of tarnishing his noble ideals through unethical actions. The situation continued to deteriorate. At this juncture, further turmoil ensued within the psychiatric hospital's administration. The warden was severely injured by a patient with mental illness who had concealed a brick in a sock, necessitating his return home for medical treatment. The newly appointed head of the hospital was a modern medical specialist who advocated for emetic therapy. He firmly believed in the critical importance of using emetics to treat the patients within the hospital to effectively save their minds, especially for the one known as the Madman, Mino. The new head discarded Mino's paintings and confiscated his collection of books. He also publicly tore up the female portraits Mino had drawn and planned to subject Mino to the latest emetic therapy. Additionally, he invited the media to witness this. Consequently, the next day, horrific photos of Mino undergoing emetic treatment were splashed across the front pages of major newspapers. Everything had been destroyed. The public, outraged, sent letters to Oxford like snowflakes in a blizzard, questioning how such a dangerous American was allowed to contribute to the great dictionary. The immense pressure led to another mental breakdown for Mino. He despised this aspect of desire intensely. In his madness, he was again controlled by the claws of lust, loathing his unclean fantasies and shameful past to the extreme. Upon learning of all these circumstances, Morey made a special visit to see Mino. Mino's hair had been shaved off and his eyes were vacant. A guard announced, "Mino is no longer here." Soon after, the dictionary committee conveyed a decision to the nobles regarding Morey. Regardless of how much vocabulary Mino had contributed to the Oxford Dictionary, his name would never be included in the list of editors. Meanwhile, the nobles also suspended Morey's position as chief editor, stating that he would temporarily remain in his post for review until a new chief editor was found. In the blink of an eye, the year 1899 arrived, and Queen Victoria celebrated her 80th birthday. At the same time, the first draft of the Oxford Dictionary was presented to the Queen as a gift by the nobility. At this moment, although Moray had returned to his position as chief editor, he still harbored a wish for the Queen to pardon the imprisoned Mino. As expected, the Queen was very pleased and generously provided Moray with an additional annual salary of £250, hoping he would focus on writing books. This strategy was specifically designed for the nobility. From that time on, Moray became a direct subordinate of the Queen, and the work of editing the dictionary was also incorporated into the royal daily affairs. The nobility were required to cease disparaging Moray's family background. However, regarding Mino's sentence, no further information was provided by the Queen's side. This development highlights the complexities and the intertwining of personal tragedy, academic pursuit, and the societal norms of the time. Moray's unwavering dedication to his work and his compassion for Mino, juxtaposed with the harsh realities of mental health treatment and societal judgment, paint a poignant picture of the era. Despite the lack of a resolution for Mino, Moray's eventual recognition and the incorporation of the dictionary project into royal affairs signify a bittersweet victory, emphasizing the enduring impact of intellectual contributions over personal misfortunes. Under the Queen's protection, Moray finally entered the editorial department of Oxford University, truly becoming the chief editor, busily compiling the dictionary in the editorial office. He visited the imprisoned Mino again. Mino expressed his gratitude, saying, "Thank you, thank you." In his vacant gaze, it seemed as if he could still recall past glories, yet appeared to have lost all memory. Moray struggled to hold back his tears, his greatest wish at that moment being to rescue Mino from the psychiatric hospital. Subsequently, Moray began to establish contacts and, with the assistance of his noble wife, successfully reached the cabinet minister in charge at the time. Moray visited the minister with great caution, a young man named Churchill, indeed, the future Prime Minister of Britain. Churchill was deeply moved by the profound friendship between Moray and Mino that had lasted for over 30 years. He stated that, although Mino could not be pardoned, he fully had the right to expel him from the country as a dangerous foreign national. Thus, with Churchill's assistance, Mino, who had been imprisoned for 38 years, successfully boarded a ship back to America in 1910 under Moray's protection. At that moment, Moray's dictionary had reached the section for the letter T, but Dr. Mino's name was not listed among the compilers. Moray continued to work diligently at his desk for another 5 years, eventually passing away at the age of 78 while at his workbench due to illness. Mino spent a decade in a rehabilitation center in the United States until he quietly passed away in 1920 at the age of 85. The first edition of the Oxford English Dictionary, OED, was continued by Moray's successors and finally completed on New Year's Eve of 1927. The next morning, the New York Times announced on its front page, with the ancient Kentish term ZYXT being incorporated, every word on the alphabet has been catalogued. The dictionary is now off to the printers, and the task is triumphantly completed. Meanwhile, the media also proclaimed that behind this monumental work lay a magnificent, heroic saga. However, even to this day, including in American newspapers, Dr. Mino's name does not appear on this list of heroes. The British completely erased Mino's story, attributing the glory of this colossal work solely to an ordinary professor who dropped out at 14. They highly recognized Moray's contributions, leading to him being knighted. Yet, in this vast dictionary comprising 12 volumes, Dr. Mino alone contributed over 13,000 entries, defining 414,125 words, and including a total of 27,306 citations. In 1933, the book made its second appearance under the name of the OED, yet still without including Mino's name. In subsequent revisions and supplements in 1972, 1976, 1982, 1986, and even in the 5th supplement edition in 1997, Mino's name was still absent from the dictionary. It wasn't until 1998, when journalist Winchester left the British National Archives, that the story of Moray and Mino, sealed away by Britain for over 100 years, was finally unveiled. Clearly, a self-taught dropout at the age of 14 and a despised madman, through their persistence and resilience, ultimately received the honor that was rightfully theirs. Indeed, although Moray and Mino's story was forgotten over the past century, their perseverance and contributions eventually received some recognition. The report by journalist Winchester successfully drew significant public attention to this historical event, bringing the remarkable life stories of these two individuals back into the public eye. Their narrative is not just a symbol of passion for knowledge and scholarship, but also demonstrates their steadfast resistance against societal prejudices and obstacles. Their tale, rekindled by Winchester's investigation, highlights the enduring impact of dedication to truth and learning, regardless of the adversities faced. It serves as a potent reminder of the importance of acknowledging and celebrating contributions from all corners, irrespective of background or circumstances. The revival of their story in public consciousness not only rectifies a historical oversight, but also inspires future generations to pursue their endeavors with courage and resilience, standing firm against the tides of societal judgment and discrimination.